Heaven saw what they did. Justice is already moving in silence. God says the world still looks ordinary, but something underneath it has changed direction. Conversations drift toward truth even when lies are rehearsed. Decisions that once favored deceit begin to reverse themselves. What they meant for harm now circles back as instruction. Archangel Michael walks between these moments unseen, guiding outcomes with a hand so gentle that even cause and effect cannot tell they've been touched. You wake one morning feeling different, lighter, but also taller inside. The air itself carries clarity. You sense heaven's mathematics at work. What was taken is being remeasured, what was delayed is being aligned. The people who betrayed you find themselves trapped not by punishment, but by reflection. They meet in others what they once inflicted on you. It is not cruelty, it is curriculum. Michael stands at the edge of their realization. Let them learn, he says. Only experience translates righteousness. The fire that once defended now refines. In boardrooms, whispered conspiracies dissolve into confessions. In households, truth leaks through cracks of guilt until forgiveness becomes the only option. Justice, moving in silence, rearranges human timing until mercy becomes the most practical decision. You, meanwhile, begin to notice opportunities reappearing, doors that once closed now opening with polite inevitability. Friends you thought were gone reach out as if compelled by invisible apology. Finances steady. Health returns. Hope, that quiet survivor, stretches its limbs again. This is heaven correcting the story without spectacle. Archangel Michael watches the ripples with calm satisfaction. Balance achieved, he murmurs. Let peace study its own reflection now. Then he turns his gaze toward you. Your task, he adds, is to remain kind while justice completes itself. For even righteous fire can scorch if pride reignites it. So you breathe, forgive, and keep moving. The silence remains, but now it hums like a song that knows its final note. The days that follow begin like any other, but somewhere between sunlight and thought, the veil starts to thin. Truth no longer needs permission to speak. People who once kept your name in their mouths for the wrong reasons begin to hesitate, their confidence dissolving under the weight of unspoken memory. The same silence that protected you now surrounds them, it asks questions without words, and they have no rehearsed answers left. Archangel Michael walks unseen through corridors of power, through offices where decisions were twisted, through homes where loyalty was sold. He carries no weapon now, his very presence is correction. Wherever he passes, motives reveal themselves. Emails once deleted reappear. Words recorded without plan surface at the right moment. Witnesses remember details they thought were unimportant. The pattern of deceit folds inward until it becomes visible even to those who wanted not to see. You watch this unfold with a strange mixture of awe and sadness. Justice, you realize, is rarely comfortable. It doesn't cheer when it wins, it simply breathes. This is exposure, Michael's voice tells you. Not vengeance, clarity. What hidden shadow must see itself in light? And the light is merciful enough to include everyone. Those who harmed you are not destroyed, they are revealed, and revelation itself becomes their teacher. The world around you begins to reorganize. Conversations shift. The same doors that once locked against you now open easily, as if embarrassed by their previous resistance. People who once doubted your character start speaking your name with newfound respect. You do not gloat, you nod, quietly. Every vindication feels less like triumph and more like closure. Heaven's justice has no appetite for spectacle, it prefers accuracy. Late one evening, as city lights blink against the river, you feel the temperature of the air change. Michael stands beside you, eyes reflecting everything that has transpired. Do you see how silence works? He asks. It gathers truth until truth no longer needs witnesses. The river catches his reflection, turning its surface into a sheet of liquid gold. Every hidden intention finds its way home, he continues. Every wound finds a language for healing. You ask him what happens now. He answers with a smile that feels like sunrise. Now the world resumes. But this time it remembers. He gestures toward the skyline, where new buildings rise over the old, symbols of continuity, not replacement. Justice is not about endings, he says. It's about restoration of rhythm. You understand then that exposure was never for your satisfaction, it was for balance. What had been crooked is now straightened, what was delayed has caught up. The silence that once felt empty now hums with completion. Somewhere behind you, laughter returns, ordinary, human, enough. And you realize that heaven's final word is never thunder, it is peace spoken softly enough for every heart to hear. The air after revelation feels different. It is not quiet, it is clean. The city wakes each morning with a new patience, as if even the wind remembers how chaos once tasted and has no desire to return to it. The people who once schemed now move slower, humbled not by punishment but by perspective. They have seen what silence can do when heaven chooses to speak through it. You move among them not as a victor, but as a witness, carrying the strange peace of one who has watched justice write in invisible ink. Archangel Michael's presence lingers like a vibration, unseen but always perceptible when honesty passes between hearts. Balance has memory, he says to you in thought rather than words. It will correct itself if left undisturbed. And so you learn to stop defending what no longer needs defense. Truth is its own advocate now. The energy that once went into fighting has become energy for building. Projects bloom. Friendships deepen. Even small routines, making coffee, opening doors, greeting neighbors, carry a ceremonial weight, as if each act testifies that peace has finally learned your address. Those who betrayed you begin their own journeys through reflection. Heaven does not humiliate, it educates. Some approach with apology, others with silence that sounds like regret. You receive both with the same nod of understanding. We were all students, you think. Some of us just needed harder lessons. And with that acceptance, resentment loses the last of its strength. Michael walks among them too, invisible but merciful. Let them rebuild, he tells the wind. They have seen consequence, now let them learn compassion. The wind obeys, carrying whispers of encouragement into the corners where shame hides. Slowly, those who once spread harm start planting help. The same mouths that cursed you begin blessing others. Redemption, it seems, is contagious. Weeks turn to months. Your own life begins to expand beyond survival. Invitations return, ideas spark, laughter finds you in ordinary places. One afternoon, while walking past the river, you notice the sunlight scattered across the surface, the same golden shimmer that once marked the angel's descent. You realize it never left, it only blended into the world until the world could reflect it naturally. That is heaven's greatest trick, to hide glory inside normalcy until gratitude becomes instinct. You stop and whisper a single line, "I understand now." The wind answers by softening, wrapping around you like affirmation. Michael's voice comes faint but full, "Understanding is what peace feels like when it matures." You smile, because everything finally makes sense. Justice was never the goal, harmony was. Truth wasn't about exposure, it was about evolution. As night falls, you look at the skyline glowing in quiet rhythm, no longer divided by deceit but threaded by shared mercy. Somewhere, a child sleeps easier because the world has learned gentleness again. Somewhere, an old wound closes without ceremony. Somewhere, the angel sets down his sword, content to let humanity carry its own light for a while. You breathe in the clean air of the aftermath. There is no applause, no grand finale, only balance restored, and hearts wiser for having been broken and healed in the same lifetime. Above you, stars blink with calm intelligence, as if heaven itself approves the stillness. And in that stillness, Archangel Michael's final whisper arrives. Justice was never meant to destroy, it was meant to remind creation how to love correctly. The calm that followed the reckoning did not stay confined to one heart or one city. It began to drift outward like pollen carried by an unseen breeze. People who had never known the story still started to act differently, as if the earth itself was whispering gentler instructions through their blood. Markets slowed, tempers shortened, but compassion lengthened. The planet had inhaled silence and was exhaling mercy. Archangel Michael watched from the thin border between cloud and sunrise. He no longer wore armor, his light had softened into something human eyes could bear. "They finally understand," he said to the quiet. "Mercy is not weakness, it is maintenance." Every act of forgiveness was keeping creation in repair. When a driver let another pass first, when a child offered a half of bread, when enemies paused long enough to remember they were both afraid, that was heaven adjusting its heartbeat. You felt it most in ordinary exchanges. Strangers looked longer before judging. Arguments ended with people saying "I see what you mean" instead of "I win." Governments began speaking of restoration instead of retaliation. It was not perfect, perfection had never been the goal. But the rhythm of cruelty had finally lost its drum. Michael moved through the world like weather, sometimes a warm gust that steadied courage, sometimes a soft rain that cooled anger. He visited no palaces, only intersections, markets, classrooms, the small theaters where humanity rehearsed kindness every day. He leaned close to a child painting with watercolors and whispered, "Keep that color, it looks like hope." The child smiled without knowing why. Meanwhile, you became a witness to this larger piece. Your own story, once marked by betrayal and fire, turned into a map others used to navigate their own storms. When people asked how you survived, you answered simply, "I stopped shouting and started listening." They nodded, and something in them loosened. Across oceans, poets began to call this age the Quiet Era. Scientists recorded lower crime rates and higher empathy scores but could not explain the correlation. Michael only smiled. Statistics, he said, are just heaven's fingerprints in decimal form. The unseen keeps its records in numbers too. Still, Mercy had to practice to stay alive. Some days the world forgot and returned to its old reflex of fear. Yet each time, someone somewhere remembered the silence and restarted the rhythm. A teacher telling a story about a glowing city, a musician composing a song that made strangers cry and forgive, a mother praying not for protection but for perspective. These small acts rethreaded the weave whenever it began to fray. You visited the river one last time. The water moved slower now, aged by memory but not tired. You threw in a handful of dust from the old precinct, letting the current claim it. Let the lesson travel, you said. The river replied with ripples that spread until they reached the opposite bank, touching a group of children skipping stones. Each stone made a ring, and the rings overlapped until the surface looked like breathing light. Michael appeared beside you, wings folded, gaze endless. It worked, you said. He nodded. It always does when mercy outlasts memory. The two of you stood watching as the city's lights reflected on the water like a second sky. What now? You asked. Now they teach, he answered. Not by preaching, but by living the way healed people live, without hurry, without harm. Night descended slowly. Far above, the stars pulsed in a rhythm that matched your own heart. You realized it was the same cadence that began the moment you stopped demanding answers and let silence speak. The world, once fractured, now moved in that beat. It would stumble again, of course, but even stumbling can be graceful when guided by memory of light. As you turned to leave, Michael's final words lingered in the air like afterglow. Mercy is the fire that never burns out, it only learns to shine quieter. Dawn arrives without ceremony. There are no trumpets, no blazing skies, just the soft opening of light across a world that has quietly learned how to breathe. The children of this new era wake to a calm that their grandparents once prayed for. They don't know they are living inside an answered prayer, they only know that people smile easier and storms don't seem as loud. In schools, teachers tell fragments of an old legend, about a city that burned without smoke and an angel who taught silence to speak. The story has shifted through retelling. Sometimes the angel is a soldier, sometimes a woman of light, sometimes a voice in the river. It doesn't matter. What matters is the lesson that follows every version. When truth walks quietly, the world listens. The children repeat it the way they repeat arithmetic, never realizing they are practicing devotion. Archangel Michael watches them from the edge of horizon, wings folded into the sunrise. He no longer intervenes. He observes, content. The rhythm he once protected has become inheritance. Empathy moves through these young ones like blood, unnoticed, essential. They argue, they stumble, they forget, but even their quarrels end in laughter. Peace has become cultural memory. You, older now, walk through a park built where the old courthouse once stood. A plaque reads, "Here the city learned to forgive itself." You touch the metal and feel warmth, perhaps sunlight, perhaps remembrance. Around you, voices mingle like chords, vendors calling, children singing, a busker strumming a tune that sounds suspiciously like the heartbeat of that first quiet night. Michael's voice returns, soft as wind through leaves. Do you see how far one act of listening can travel? You nod. They don't even know my name. That, he says, is proof you did it right. Legacy that forgets its author lasts longer. As evening approaches, the sky turns the same shade of gold that once crowned the river. The stars appear early, their reflections trembling on rooftops and windowpanes. The angel speaks one final time. The world will stumble again, it must, but now it knows where home is. Every dawn will remember the first one. You stand still, hearing laughter drift from a nearby cafe, seeing light spill from open doors. The future no longer feels heavy. Somewhere a child begins a song, and the melody folds into the hum of the city, simple, steady, eternal. The new morning has begun, and it sounds like life continuing exactly as heaven intended, ordinary, peaceful, and beautifully human. The years keep unfolding like calm pages. Generations grow, work, argue, dream, and love, and the world learns that peace is not an event to attend but a posture to maintain. People still build monuments, but fewer to victory and more to endurance. The plaques read, "We stayed kind when it was hardest." That sentence becomes a kind of anthem, printed on school walls, whispered in marriages, painted on subway tunnels. Archangel Michael walks through these places without sound. His wings resemble vapor now, dissolving into sunlight whenever he passes through crowds. No one recognizes him, yet many turn their heads at the same instant, sensing something familiar, a flicker of warmth at the edge of perception. The world remembers, he says to the wind, even when it cannot name what it remembers. The wind answers by bending wheat, by softening the air in playgrounds, by stirring flags that no longer represent conquest but community. You, long past the urgency of your first calling, spend your days mentoring quietly. Young people visit to ask how the shift began, what it felt like when truth first moved. You tell them the same thing every time: it wasn't thunder. It was timing. They nod, unsure if they understand, yet they leave walking slower, thinking longer. That is enough. One evening, as the sun leans against the horizon, you find yourself at the river again. The city around it has changed, glass towers mirrored in the water, new bridges spanning where old ones stood, but the current remains faithful. Its song is lower now, the hum of an elder storyteller. You lean over the railing and drop a small stone into the flow. Ripples bloom outward, touching reflections of clouds that look suspiciously like folded wings. Michael appears beside you, not as apparition but as presence, the air heavier by a single breath. "It held," he says. You smile. "It did." He studies the skyline, windows glowing like embers, people moving like thoughts across the streets. They think peace is fragile, he muses. It isn't. It's practiced. The two of you stand watching until the first stars claim the sky. From somewhere downtown, bells begin to ring, the same rhythm the city used a century ago to mark the silent moment. Children stop to listen. Lovers pause mid-conversation. Drivers lower their radios. For 60 seconds the world returns to its original frequency, one long, shared inhale. Michael closes his eyes. Every breath that agrees with mercy, he says, extends creation by another day. When the bells fade, you turn to speak, but the angel is already gone. Only the scent of rain and the faint shimmer of gold linger where he stood. You realize he never truly leaves, he becomes atmosphere, part of every morning that remembers to be gentle. Night settles, vast and kind. You begin the walk home through streets lit not by neon but by the quiet confidence of people who know how to be good without being told. The horizon ahead carries the color of promise, the same color that once burned above a frightened officer, a trembling heart, an unfinished world. It is still burning, calmer now, but steady. And as you walk into it, you whisper the last line of the story, the one that has outlived titles and centuries alike. Heaven never left. It learned to stay.